Einstein as an incredible, brilliant man. He was born in 1879, and he was considered a major failure. In fact, Einstein didn't even speak until he was 4 years old. At the age of 16 in 1895, he actually failed the examination to get into a university, something that we might call maybe a junior college in Zurich. And eventually he did go on to graduate, but he struggled. I mean, he really struggled. And he nearly dropped out. And he did so poorly in his studies that his father, at the time of his death, actually considered him a major failure. Of course, that really devastated Einstein. His heart was completely broken. And even after graduation, he wandered, unsure of what to do with his life. And after some time, he ended up getting a job as an insurance salesman, actually going door to door, selling insurance. And eventually, 2 years later, he took a job at the patent office as an assistant to evaluate applications of patents from a variety of different devices. Now, of course, this is the same individual who brought us the theory of relativity with groundbreaking work done in physics and math, and helped us reach a deeper understanding of the universe, how it works. He developed several core fundamental laws, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1921. And he created the beginnings of the theory of quantum physics, which we use in this teaching today. And then there's another example. I love me some Oprah Winfrey. I'm always inspired by her story. Born in 1954 in Mississippi to a single teenage mother, Oprah grew up in sheer and utter poverty. Most of her childhood, she lived with a grandmother. When she was about 8 years old, she went back to live with her mother in Wisconsin. Her mother had another child, was her stepsister. And about the time of that happening in the early years, she will tell you herself that she was molested. She was sexually molested by her uncle, by her cousin, by a friend. And at the age of 13, she ran away. At the age of 14, she had her own child. That child was born prematurely and died shortly after birth. At the age of 17, she won a beauty pageant, and she interned at a radio station, and that's when she realized that she loved media. She went on to college. She went on to be a news anchor in Nashville, and then after college, she went on to Baltimore to be the co-anchor of a news station. But then she was later removed because they told her she just wasn't good for TV. But in 1983, at the age of 29, she relocated to Chicago and took over a fledgling show called AM Chicago. And that became the Oprah Winfrey Show. She became the highest rated talk show in Chicago. Today, she's a multi-billionaire and has had a major impact on the world today. She was able to overcome a number of failures, but she didn't give up, because through all of it, she reached international fame, and now she's a household name. There's a quote by Thomas Troward that would wrap all this up. He says, "Relying on the maxim that principle is not bound by precedents, we should not limit our expectations of the future. And if our speculations lead us to the conclusion that we have reached a point where we are not only able but required by law of our own being to take a more active part in our personal evolution, then heretofore the discovery will afford us a new outlook upon life and widen our horizons with fresh interests, brightening hopes, And this came out of the book, The Creative Process of the Individual. So as I'm sitting there, Idell, I'm thinking about my own story. I'm thinking about how all these things worked in my life. And it reminded me of relationship that I had with a young woman some years ago when I had a nonprofit organization called the Women's Success Network. The purpose of the mission of that organization was to help women go to work by providing them with suits and being able to give a good first impression. And that's where I met Rosalie. Rosalie impressed me. She had such a vigilance for being right and getting things done. Rosalie had a past that I didn't even find out till later, but she had been 3 years drug-free. In that process, she had lost her child, but in these years of getting back on her feet and being clean, she did get her child back. So she worked with me. We worked side by side into the stores, what it was. We would hang clothes and we would clean clothes and, help women come in. She'd only been there for about a month. I got a call on the phone, and it was actually for her. So I gave her the phone, and as I'm looking at her, I'm thinking, who is this calling her? And I'm looking at her, and I see a sense of horror overcome. This was a person that was telling her that her son was at the airport with a social worker on their way to New Jersey, which is where they were from. Because Rosalie had fallen behind in her rent. When I had hired her, she had been out of work for 2 months. And so, of course, she went home. And I tried for days to call her. I went by her house. She wouldn't answer the door. She was in deep, deep depression. And so I finally got a hold of her. I said, okay, what do we need to do? We need to make a plan. What is it we need to do? She says, my court date in New Jersey is this particular day. I said, okay, I'm going to get some tickets. I'm going to go up there with you. So we went to New Jersey. We went to the court. And in the court, they go to family court, and we're sitting in the lobby waiting for our turn. And her lawyer came up to her and said, you know what, Rosalie, I'm so sorry. You're going to lose your son. But knowing what I know, that's her imagination. I just sat there in silence, in spirit. Eventually, we went into the courtroom. Person after person came up to testify, nothing for her, even though she had made tremendous strides. Each person, even her own lawyer, just recommended that the child go back to the foster parents in New Jersey. So then it was Rosalie's turn. Rosalie had created a book, literally, of character references, of accomplishments, people, peers that were supporting her, and she presented it to the judge. Then the judge asked me, what did I have to say? I explained who I was. She said, Avon, I'm so sorry that you made all this way up here. She said, I'm impressed by Rosalie, but honestly, my hands are tied. I just stood there. And then all of a sudden, the judge put her hand behind her head. She said, something's not right. She said, something's telling me that something's not right. She looked around the courtroom and she said, all of you women in here, have you ever had a time when things didn't work out? Did you ever have a time when you lost a job and you got behind? I said, I know I have. She said, "Rosalie, please come approach the bench." She said, "If I ever have, I've never had a person in my courtroom so prepared and so on track as you." She said, "I'm the judge. Rosalie, take your child home." So, it's stories like that. And you have them too. You have these stories in your life where you decided and where you knew that there was no other choice. We all have stories like that. And as I'm sitting there in my chair, Lee, I'm inspired to examine some of my own beliefs around relationships, career, love, health. In fact, I have an example of a relationship I have in people. I recognize that my relationship is the same relationship that I have with myself, because we are all one. We are all individualized expressions of God. And I have to remind myself that only God is my source, my supply. God is the wholeness of my health. And God is the activity in my career, in my work life. Therefore, I wouldn't even mind being reminded that what I put out returns to me, that no thought is neutral. All recognition is recognition of self. Then I would want to drink in the wisdom and the words of the famous Neville Goddard when he said, "Change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. Do not try to change the people. They're only messengers telling you who you are. Revalue yourself and they will confirm the change." And after I've soaked up all of the many ancient truths and the time-tested laws, I may want to be reminded of the creative process. I would want to be reminded that the creative process, and remember that I cannot not use the creative process in every area of my life. No matter if it's my health or my financial condition, my work or my career, the process is the same. God is the source of it all through the same creative process, no exceptions. I would want to be reminded of the tools that I use and that I have at my disposal. I would want to remember that they are nothing but permission slips. Every tool, if I had a whiteboard and listed every practice, every tool, every quote, every book to self-develop, all of it would pale from just knowing and recognize the single truth that God is all there is. And even though there's so much to learn for me to remember, there is something for me to learn. And as I move through this life and as I remember that we are all connected, and I realize that what I see in you has to exist in me in order for me to recognize it, I'm reminded that yes, it is all vibration. And even though I might not want to, or I might even resist this truth to some extent, because after all, there are some people that make it difficult to think that we're one, that challenges me to raise my level of consciousness I kind of liken it to being on a football field where you're getting beat around, beat up, and knocked down and tackled, and then you have the opportunity to stop and climb up the bleachers and look down. And when you do that, you're looking from a different perspective. You're looking at the whole, and you begin to realize that what you're looking at is perfect. Ernest Holmes would sum it up in his book, The Science of Mind, the text that we use in this philosophy on page 458. He says the things that we need to ask for and the things that we believe, that we are to receive them. We are to ask and believe that we receive them. We are surrounded by a universal law, which is creative. It moves from the thought to the thing. Unless there is first an image, it cannot move, for there would be nothing for it to move to. Prayer, which is a mental act, must accept its own answer as an image in the mind before the divine energies can play upon it and make it productive. And as we must plant a seed before we can reap a harvest, so must we believe before our prayers can be answered. Prayer should reach a point of acceptance, an unqualified, undisputed place of agreement. Let us take the mental image of our desires to the bosom of the creative life, and here make them known by impressing them upon it with a positive belief. And if we do this, our prayers will be answered. As I'm sitting there, I would want to be reminded that in everyone's life, miracles occur every day. If I can remember to savor these moments, to appreciate the fact that there's something that's breathing me, something that's moving me, if I can appreciate the fact that I didn't make this world, if I could spend more time recognizing and celebrating those moments, I am literally priming the pump for an amazing thing to occur in my life. This simple exercise of appreciation in all things aligns me with the Almighty God. And that's how I experience the astonishing power of belief. Thank you.